The rocket passes Earth at the precise instant the Sun experiences a coronal mass ejection. The space station rotates 360 degrees every minute and can therefore be used as a timing device. The red arc denotes the light that was emitted from the coronal event. The observers in the space station knew the exact time the rocket passed the Earth and are now doing relative distance calculation between the rocket and the light emitted from the coronal event. We stop the animation at the instant that the rocket and the light met. At t = 0, the rocket was 93 million miles from the coronal mass ejection. At t = 5 minutes and 33 seconds, or 333 seconds, the observers in the rocket saw the coronal mass ejection, so the distance between them was 0. Applying the simple rate times time equals distance equation and solving for r, we get r in miles per second equals 93 million miles divided by 333 seconds, which is equal to 279,000 miles per second. Divide that by the normal speed of light, which is 186,000 miles per second, we get 1.5 c, or 1.5 times the speed of light. Why is this logical reasoning not accepted in the scientific community? What do they use to justify the speed of light is constant? They use the equation for the velocity of light, which is velocity equals frequency times wavelength. We have slowed time so the light from the Sun arrives at the rate of 1 cycle per second. We have also expanded each wavelength to equal 1 light second in length. So, velocity equals 1 cycle per second times 1 light second per cycle. The result is 1 light second per second, which is by definition the speed of light. The counter began the instant the blue cycle simultaneously reached Earth and the rocket. It will count each time a new cycle reaches the Earth. We are going to stop the animation and plug the numbers into our light velocity equation. The Earth saw a total of 13 cycles. The rocket saw an additional 6.5 cycles due to its velocity, and therefore saw 19.5 cycles. The Earth saw 13 cycles in 13 seconds, which is 1 cycle per second. The velocity is equal to 1 cycle per second times 1 light second per cycle, which is equal to 1 light second per second, or 1 c, the normal speed of light. The rocket saw 19.5 cycles in 13 seconds, which is 1.5 cycles per second. The velocity equals 1.5 cycles per second times 1 light second per cycle, which equals 1.5 light seconds per second, or 1.5 c. For whatever reason, physicists cannot stand the velocity of light being anything but 1 c. They take this perfectly logical scenario and demand that c equals 1. In order for that to happen, when a rocket sees a higher frequency due to its velocity, physicists arbitrarily force c to equal 1 and shrink the wavelength to balance the equation. Let's see what this looks like. This brings up a few questions. Does the rocket and its velocity draw the Sun and Earth closer together? Or does the rocket's presence cause the Sun to produce more cycles than normal while remaining at the same distance from Earth? Does the rocket compress by the same amount the wavelength does, which is 0.667 times normal? Or does it shrink based on the Lorentz transformation by a factor of 0.866? Perhaps it compresses by 0.667 for the light velocity equation, and then compresses again to satisfy Einstein's special theory of relativity. With the wavelength compressed, wouldn't that mean the Earth and the rocket would see a higher frequency since the velocity is still the same? Wouldn't that result in the need to further reduce the wavelength to keep the equation balanced? That would create a runaway situation in which the frequency would tend toward infinity as the wavelength approached 0. Is this really necessary? Wouldn't it make more sense to just allow the velocity to increase when we know that it has? The velocity of light is dependent on the velocity of the emitting source.